Hi, this is Tom Salemi of Device Talks. I seized control of 160 Studios once again to deliver my manifesto about Device Talks Boston, which is happening on May 1st and 2nd at the Boston Convention Exhibition Center. And my friends Joe Mullings and Holly Scott have agreed to help me deliver the news about Device Talks Boston so I can get out of here as soon as possible and give the studios back to real professionals. So thanks for having me and for indulging my need to talk about my conference.
You got your own room here, Tom. It's like those hotels. Is it Tom Salemi suite?
I wouldn't call it a room. It's
Tom Salemi slept here.
It's a closet with a blanket, but I love it. It's great. Don't get me wrong. No, seriously. Thanks for your support of Device Talks Boston, for having me down here, and for helping me uncover some things about medtech. Every time I come down here, I learn a ton, and I know today will be just as educational for me and for folks who are watching. So. Let's just take a moment to talk about the state of medtech overall. And since you're an executive recruitment firm and you're so plugged into the labor market, I'd like to get a sense of where we are with the labor market more broadly. And let's start with the big companies. We've had some recent news about realignments and Zimmer Biomet having a reorganization that it announced recently. We saw some changes and some layoffs at some of the larger companies last year as well. Are we still going through this process? Have we moved through this process? What's the state of the labor market and the job market for medtech at this point?
I'll jump in first on that one. So look, Zimmer shouldn't be a surprise. You know, Ivan, when he took over the helm, he's been there about 6 months now. I think Ivan always had a way, as the COO, that he would have preferred to run the ship before the previous incumbent. So that shouldn't be a surprise. And if you listen to what Ivan's been chatting about out in the public domain, it's been about a reimagination of what Zimmer represents, where he's going to be a partner, a provider of services, as well as implants and robotics to the ASCs and his partners. So that he might be making room for new services coming in, as well as top grading his organization, like every good leader should. So I wouldn't be surprised if you saw more of that in him building out in areas. And again, reflective of what we saw Medtronic do and continue to do, J&J do and continue to do. So these large strategics will continue to adjust. And one final thought, you know, you're seeing companies like Meta and Apple start to cut into, and they're an indicator, start to cut into substantially some of their team where they believe AI may be able to take over some of the more low-hanging fruit to start with. And that should not be a surprise, especially to the people in sort of that domain,
no.
Right? Eventually, somebody's going to pay the price for not constantly making themselves invaluable. And so I would say it's probably going to be a year or two before we see that at large in medtech. But I will see eventually. I think AI in healthcare medtech starts to hit it from the administrative side before it does from the therapeutic side.
Interesting. So the Zimmer Biomet move with Ivan looking more at services, is that akin to what Omar was preaching at Medtronic 8 years ago when they started to say we're going to be more of a service provider as well as a device provider, or is it a different?
Well, I think the way I would interpret what Ivan said, in my interpretation, I don't want to put words in Ivan, but when he and I chatted at the AVIMED conference, he said, I've got to look at the ASCs as a partnership.
Yeah.
We're not just going to be dropping off a robot and figure it out. We're not just going to be dropping off implants and say, put them in. He's going to start looking at how can he provide a partnership there from both a financing side, a capability side, a just-in-time side, because that's really what the ASC model looks like. You know, and we've seen Lobo's done that well with Stryker to date. Maybe not excellent, but he's done it well as any medtech company has, and we'll talk about it in a little bit. But I think ASCs is the next front for an opportunity for both the large strategics and the small players.
Interesting. And Holly, how about on the smaller company size, the mid-size, the startup side? What are the job opportunities there? I mean, we'll be talking about financing in a minute or so. I mean, that obviously drives employment, but what is the market like right now for folks looking to work at a smaller disruptive medtech company?
Well, we're coming off of a historically challenging year, but funding is coming. It's if you survive your 50 to 300 pitches and you actually get the check that you need, Now it's all about getting to milestones, and that's where we come in. You know, where we came out Jan 1, it's been dramatically different hiring-wise. We're extremely busy, and look, the unemployment market really hasn't changed. It's been hovering like 3.5% all year. So what are we looking at here? We're looking at a market that is dynamic. We're looking at some pockets. The strategics are they're reactive, right? We're not looking at them at saying where the market's going. The organizations that have felt the squeeze and made the changes, they're reacting to market conditions. Where the money has been going and where it continues to go is what we're excited about. I mean, look at diabetes. I mean, look at Dexcom, right? You know, $3.7 billion organization and had double 20% growth and expecting it again this year. So there's growth, there's opportunity, there's investment. It just what ponds are you fishing in, right? Where are you looking?
Interesting. Do we see any sort of disruption from AI at the lower startup level? I imagine not. I imagine this is more of a provider. It'll be in healthcare. It'll hit the providers first, as Joe just indicated. But over the next 5 years within startups, do we see or anticipate any sort of change to what kind of jobs are created? What kind of people are needed?
We're still seeing AI being a big discussion point within the technologies that they're creating. In terms of actually taking away jobs in that space, I don't know if it's as applicable because anyone in a startup usually has 5 jobs of their own, right? They're usually handling 5, 6, 7 positions within an organization and a function.
Probably would welcome AI.
Yeah, right. Exactly. There might be some huge benefit there. But you know, Joe hit on a huge point. If we're not constantly looking as individuals to where we can add value and continue to add tremendous value in different ways, that's dynamic, it's never static, that's your best career move right there.
Amen.
On the AI side, Tom, so there is a category emerging right now, and you're going to, I think over the next 24 months, you're going to start to see major investment and major build. And it's a precision-guided therapeutics sort of category. And we really haven't done this before. So if you look at If we look at the sandwich, let's put precision-guided therapeutics right in the middle as the lunch meat, if you will. On each side of that, you've got the large imaging, what I call big iron imaging. You've got the Philips, you've got the Siemens, you have the GE, where we can do this pre-op imaging. And then on the other side, the other piece of bread, if you will, is the companies that can do the therapeutic side, especially on the interventional side. So you got your Boston Scientific, your J&J's, your Medtronics. But in the middle there, you're going to have an intraoperative imaging capability start to come out. And it's going to be a pharmaceutical biotech play where, much like, imagine Firefly, where you can light up the areas of which you can attach a molecule to a diseased cell. And you're going to be able to see that very clearly. And it's happening right now in oncology. There's a company called OnTarget out there. And they're in a partnership with Stryker. So watch this really closely. That you can go ahead and inject this pharmaceutical, and it attaches itself to the cancer cells. And then you can, with the pre-op image, intra-op imaging, you can overlay them, and then you can get a highly precise, so let's call it takeout, where you're not worrying about margins as much anymore. And you can be very precise with that. I think you're going to start to see over the next couple of years this technology enter, starting out right now in thoracic and pulmonary, but I think you're going to see this expand everywhere and be able to light those up. So this is where you're going to get drug device come into play, and it's going to be an unlock empowerment for the big iron imaging and then the therapeutic interventional side. So market today that start seeing precision-guided therapeutics are going to be a big play into medtech, an unlock.
Wow, this is why.
All startups, all using AI.
This is why I come down here. This is great stuff, and I want to follow up on Stryker when we start talking about M&A, but let's just focus on financing. I mean, this all comes down to dollars. We talked about companies raising money. What are you hearing in terms of that sense? The dollars are down. HSBC had the dollars down again from 2023 to 2022 to 2023. Everyone kind of went a little bonkers during COVID and just invested. I really don't know how that happened, but the numbers went up, and now they're going back down to I guess a more understandable level. But do we see what is the market? What is the opportunity for fundraising for startups at this point? What are you folks hearing from the folks that you're working with?
Want me to handle that?
Yeah, you go first.
Sure. So everything's going to be down from 2023. Let's just put that in perspective. 2020 was a tremendous year, right? We are tracking right now in the first 6, 7 weeks, or actually the last 10 weeks, on 2020 levels, the money that is coming in. So that's a really interesting area to watch, is where are we trending to? You've got to take that outlier out, like any statistic. You've got to take that low end and high end out just to start to level set. So that's number one. But what I see really, and we could dig into it deeper after Holly gives you her thoughts on it, is I think that the market right now, public markets right now, are impacted by this GLP-1 overhang. And I think it's an overreaction, because when you look at GLP-1, it's really influencing the public markets, but it's also influencing venture money. Why? Because the GLP-1, people are saying that this is going to have a substantial impact on technologies around diabetes, around kidney health, around cardiovascular, around robotics. And candidly, I think that it's going to be a flash in the pan in regards to an impact on those markets. And longitudinally, people are going to relax and look at, Holly mentioned Dexcom, Tandem, Dexcom, Abbott, they all took a hit late last year on the output of these GLP-1 results. Startups who have to look at a 5 to 7 year investment, maybe longer if it's a PMA, they're holding back their money in those areas until this declares itself, because it is a clear threat out there. But I'll dig into it more, my details, what I think about that and why I think it's overblown relative to how it's going to hit the device world. But it does impact public markets, stock prices, which then impact venture money and private equity money.
Yeah, and Joe's point about the outlier years is something that we can't ignore, because 2020, 2021, and the hangover from that in 2022 and 2023, look, all it did was reset to what our baseline norm is. And yes, that incrementally grows, but in terms of investment and in terms of raising money from VCs, in most cases with the young companies, it's not dramatically different. As long as you have a strong market opportunity, strong leadership, strong story, strong reimbursement path, all of the gets, then you're in a decent place to go out and raise capital. There's certainly as many, if not more, interested investors in healthcare than ever before. There are more eyes on healthcare investment. What's happened, though, with 68% of our startups in 2021 and 2022 being something software centric, those companies are struggling to figure out how they're going to make money. So if they can't tell a story about monetization, or if they struggle telling a story, or if they struggle to meet the story that they told, all have impact on investor and finance interest. So the message in terms of who's doing what in financing is, as long as you can keep that story clean and clear early, you should be okay.
On the public companies too, Tom, it was interesting, some numbers here. My homework is Q4 medical sector. So there was a 22% decline in earnings in spite of a 4.2 increase in sales. And then third quarter was 16% decline in profits and a 6.6 reported growth. And so what do you attribute that to? Well, you attribute that to supply chain issues. You attribute that to inefficiencies. You attribute that to costs going up of materials. So right now, the medtech industry, the big strategics who are known for distribution, supply chain, manufacturing, all those silos are being hit substantially with all of the geopolitical issues going on right now, supply chain issues, China. Don't underestimate that. People don't want to talk about China. I still will come back on it, and I think it's a thorn in our side, and you're starting to see over the last year the large strategics sort of pulling or mirroring their supply chain there to pull it into the States. So you've got those dynamics in there, and those dynamics are not going to go away. And that's why I think you see some of the big strategics having to take down their labor costs of their employees in-house, and that won't stop. I don't think you're going to see a big build-up there on the R&D, manufacturing, quality reg side. I think you're going to start to see growth on the commercial side, if anything else.
Well, those are all great insights. And as I'm listening, I don't know, I see little breadcrumbs of worry there. I mean, you're seeing cuts on the elements that you're talking about with strategics. I agree with you about startup financing. I mean, I've never been talking to entrepreneurs for 20 years now. Like I've never heard anyone say, there's so much money out there. Like it's so easy to raise capital. Like we've never been at that point. It's always been difficult. And I think it's good to hear that there's so many new investors out there, but the emphasis on sort of a commercial plan, while it's important and makes sense, that's a big hurdle for like a really innovative early stage startup. So am I a Bostonian looking at this in a cynical way and saying, now is the time to panic, everybody flee? Or should I be looking at this as a positive way or as a negative way? Where are we? What does the next 2 years look for MedTech? Are we sort of on a decline, or are we ramping up, or are we plateauing? Because there seems to be a lot of plates in the air, a lot of things at play.
I would say, first of all, you're being redundant. Cynical Bostonian. You just had to say you're a Bostonian. So let's get that straight.
That's right. If I had said handsome Bostonian, it would have been great.
I think, and we've chatted about this, 2024 we're starting to see a slight ramp up, right? But it will be better than 2023. You just have dynamics entering the marketplace, Tom. I think you have a transition happening right now in health tech, med tech that we've not had before, which is this digital transition, more drug device coming in. You've got the private equity money coming in where venture no longer is going to go. We've chatted about this. PE is coming in a very strong way. The build to buy model is also coming in a very strong way. And then you're going to start to see the partnering occur from the large strategics for survival. They're going to start coming in and partnering with these startup companies. I think the startup world is probably going to be the best 3 years coming up by Q3 of 2024 that we may have ever seen.
Interesting.
I do think the large strategics are going to be flat because they're going to be figuring this out. And I also think the large strategics are going to have to, they're going to fumble around a little bit for the next 2 or 3 years, figuring out how do they serve the ASC market, because none of them are set up strategically to sell into those, support those, price into those. That, I think, out of all the things I mentioned earlier, the ASC transition is going to be the thorn in the side on the big strategics, and it's going to be an opportunity for the small emerging companies who can sell into there and no longer have to sell into an institution.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's going to be a huge opportunity for young companies. The M&A market will be ripe. You know, we're seeing lots of signs of that over the next 12 months and beyond. So I expect that to continue, and the young companies will benefit from that. Like Joe pointed out, this is a world we haven't been in before, but it's certainly a good one. There's a lot of good ahead. Look at the Axonics acquisition, first of the year. I mean, that's a huge, again, fastest growing med tech company in 2023 was Axonics. In terms of revenue growth and size, they blew everybody away. Outset was number 2, and it was by half. So they had the formula down, and commercial ramp up was successful. There's opportunities there, even pre-commercial, especially for the organizations like the strategics that are going to need to have something in order to continue to be competitive.
Now let's continue to drill down on M&A. I'd love to hear more about, Joe, about your outlook on where we're at, but specifically you mentioned Stryker earlier in precision oncology. Kevin Lobo in his recent call said that they're going to be looking to be active players in M&A in 2024, and it's whenever they make a big buy, it's a really influential, game-changing kind of buy. What do you anticipate Stryker happening? Is it a move into oncology? Is this sort of where they go next? Do you have any insights on that? And then speak, I guess, more broadly about the M&A market for MedTech.
Yeah, look, Stryker still is one of my favorite companies, whether it's from a stock perspective, a leadership perspective, really balancing out their portfolio and serving the entire healthcare ecosystem versus getting into an OR or a cath lab. So they really have broadly looked at how are they going to approach the emerging market and what the market's going to be. And I think they've done that better than some of the other large strategics out there that have as big a sort of offering, if you will. So I don't think Medtronic and J&J have done that very well so far. And it's a little harder because they're a bit bigger, but nonetheless. I think you're going to see Kevin and the team be active in M&A. You know, one of the things that Lobo said in one of your sessions, one of your talks with him was, we always have to make sure we have enough smart people in our organization that when we go out in M&A, we're able to really evaluate, is that technology, does that technology have legs? Does it match up with what we want to do and where the market's going? I think Lobo has done a really good job of keeping the right people on his team in the diligence process, better than some of the other big players. And you've seen that, whether it's from a quality perspective, supply chain perspective, or even acquiring these billion-dollar technologies. Kevin has done a good job of keeping high-level thinkers who are good technical leads. J&J and Medtronic, not as much. And it's why they've had some of these acquisitions blow up on them. So I like that a lot. I think you're going to see J&J just as active as Stryker this upcoming year in M&A. They're still working through and we'll talk about that when we talk about the robotics, they're working through a very sensitive lawsuit right now between Auris and J&J. And I think that has got a lot of their attention right now. It has got them on hold in certain areas. But that was an unfortunate outcome, what's happening there, and it's going to have an impact on their M&A in that category, but maybe not in other categories. And I think you're going to see them divest themselves of a couple properties that are not serving them well, thereby not serving their patients well. But overall, I think Medtronic is quiet this year. They're having some struggles. I think you're going to see Edwards active. I still believe J&J picks up Edwards, though, this year.
Interesting.
I think you're going to see Abiomed continue to grab market share, OUS especially, where they haven't had as much penetration. I wouldn't be surprised to see acquisitions in the J&J Abiomed product portfolio as well. So Edwards active, Stryker active, Medtronic, I think a little quiet, J&J super active in those areas. And I think you're going to continue to see some of the neuro companies start to acquire too, because getting real estate and land grab in that area is going to be really important, because that's the next big growth area.
Regarding Edwards and J&J, was the spin out of critical care, was that part of that move? Or
Could be.
Yeah.
Divesting themselves of that. J&J, I mentioned it before, you can't go into heart failure if you don't have a feeder system. And J&J does not have anything substantial in the structural space. And so picking up Edwards makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of IP in there, and there's a lot of internal programs. J&J's got the free cash to do that. And that's an area that I think they'd be better off spending billions than in their surgical robotic market in internal development. So I think that shareholders would do well in that, patients would do well in that, and it starts to blow out that portfolio. And I left out Boston Sci. I'm going to make a projection here as well. I think Boston Sci gets involved in robotics in the endovascular space in the next 24 months. And we heard Mike last year at Device Talk say, I've stayed out of robotics. I would be really surprised, and it's because it's a different type of robotics mindset. And we'll talk about that in my robotics piece. But I think that endovascular space is where you may end up seeing Boston Sci get into robotics.
Cool stuff. Good to think about. And just finally with IPOs, I mean, you talked about GLP-1 earlier. Fractal Health went out, which kind of surprised me. I guess I wasn't tracking it that closely. I wish I had talked to Arith Rajagopalian last year about GLP-1, because he's a perfect guy to talk to. But do you see any opportunities, either of you, on the IPO front in terms of opportunities for more medtechs? Was this a one-off? It feels like a one-off to me, but I missed the one-off, so maybe I can miss the two-off and the three-off as well. I'm not sure. What sense are you getting from CEOs of startups and I guess from conversations with others you've had out there? Holly, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so first of all, shout out to Jay Kaplan, who's hung in there since 2011.
I remember sitting in that little closet of an office up in Boston.
Yes. Well, look, the GLP-1s have created a very dynamically different environment for those who have either a diabetes or obesity focus. I think that was the changer over the last 12 months for the organization, to give them the option to IPO, but they do have some substantial science. They have some incredible science that they've been sitting on. So yeah, it really is going to come down to the individual company and focus.
Yeah.
I don't personally see it being dramatically different in terms of IPO market this year. The only thing I will say is, because financing has been dynamically different overall, that could pose more opportunities for organization to choose that route, should it have only been a build to buy at some point. So yeah, definitely a unique one. But let's just make sure that we appreciate how long it took for them to get there, and that it doesn't matter 510K or PMA. You're still looking at a heck of a road if you're really looking to do something clinically substantially different.
Absolutely.
Yeah, on the IPO market, you're not going to see much going on. There's too much risk right now rather than waiting another 6 or 7 months until the election's over.
Yeah.
And you determine whether it's a Democrat or Republican getting in, or if you're a Kennedy as an independent, but that's probably not going to happen, although I think the country could do well with a 3-party system. But this is Device Talks.
It is Boston, though.
Well, Boston, what is it? There's 3 pastimes: politics, sports, and revenge.
In that order.
Right, in that order.
Yeah.
The IPO market, I think, is just going to be flat, if anything, right now. But I think you will see probably the end of 24, the beginning of 25, a rush for the public market. Both PE firms looking to cash checks and potentially companies positioning to go public. But I don't think you're going to see many venture-backed because things have been held up for a while, and cash has been constrained, and we've had to, every single one of our startups has been asked to do more with less. So the fact that it's going to happen right away, I think it's going to be the start of it. There are people holding their breath right now that are ready to go public, and that's a quandary because you've got to stretch that cash out for another 10 months, that it could be $1 million, $2 million burn rate.
Right.
And the investment community is sitting on that. I want to go back to GLP-1s now. I think GLP-1 is creating markets for the medtech industry. Look, obesity is a terrible disease, but you got major problems with the GLP-1. So first of all, people see that and they get scared right away. Again, investors as well as the large strategics and the public markets, because it hurts their device sales. But first of all, obesity. So any of the semaglutide drugs that come out, you've got to have 100% compliance on that drug. It's a very expensive drug. Not everybody can afford it. Right? Obesity is only the start. Most of the diseases that get put into that, especially orthopedic knees and hips, cardiovascular disease, that doesn't start to go away or arrest itself when you start losing weight. That's a progressive disease. So you have to really look at that market appropriately. And so between the cost, the compliance, the 20% reduction in heart disease has been proven so far on that, as long as you stay along with it. But geez, so does exercise and good food and proper sleep, right? But we're a society that would rather, take an aspirin rather than a vitamin. So there's always that quick fix. I think you're going to see the GLP-1 drugs stop affecting medtech over the next 3 or 4 months when people start to get their brains about them. And you're going to start to see all those stock prices come back up, which will make investors happy. And then that will be an influence on the venture market as well.
Well, once again, thank you for letting me take over your 160 studios here to talk about Device Talks Boston. It's always great to have the Mullings Group involved in that and part of the planning. I always turn to you when I need help with speakers and topics, so I'm grateful for the insights. And thanks for letting me, again, do this, because this is just so much fun.
Always great to have you here, Tommy. You elevate us.
Ah, you're so kind.
Thanks.
Takes all of us, that's for sure. Thanks for coming down.
Of course.